Have you ever had an irrational fear? They never feel irrational to you, do they? Your fear of spiders is rational. A lot of them are very venomous. Your fear of the dark is rational. Anything could be lurking there. My fear of water slides is rational. What happened to her could happen to me. This all happened a few years ago, back when I was just out of secondary school and in my first job. I haven't thought about it for a long time. I've done everything in my power to keep away from places which would remind me of that time, but I think I should get it off my chest. Off my chest and hopefully out of my mind. I was working in a swimming pool. It was one of those really big ones, the rapids and the huge twisty flumes that snaked out of the building and into the fresh air outside. They were fully covered, like coloured, twisty, opaque straws, one red and one green. The green was slower, less steeply inclined, while the red was fast and wild. Once you got in there was no stopping yourself. Anyway, it was a Saturday in the middle of the summer holidays and the place was teeming with kids and parents. I had been placed as a stopper at the top of the slide, little more than a glorified traffic light to make sure the kids didn't end up going all down at the same time and creating a blockage. I had been told to make sure I didn't just do one kid at a time, but to stagger the children. Let one go down, wait a few seconds until they should have been about halfway, and then let the next one down. It meant the lines didn't get too long. I had been doing this for about an hour, since 9 AM, when I noticed a large bloke down at the bottom of the slide. The slide exit had a mini pool that connected with a small runway to the main pool, to stop the sliders crashing into the swimmers. Well, this man was at the edge of the mini pool and watching the children exit. I figured he had to be a parent, as that's where a lot of them tended to hang around while their children repeatedly went down the flumes. I returned my attention back to the screaming kids and forgot about him. About 20 minutes later, I saw him in the line to go down the slide. Now, it isn't strange for a 20-year-old to want to go down the slides for a laugh, and sometimes the parents will come up with the kids. This guy looked about 40, and now he was closer, I could see he did not look right. He stood there in large baggy shorts. It didn't look like swimming shorts, but just normal outdoors clothing. And he had the most gaunt, sickly-looking body I'd ever seen on a man. Still, he was huge. Probably about 6'6", and walked with this weird stoop that made it look like he was constantly ducking to avoid the ceiling. I also noticed that he didn't have a kid. He made me feel damned uneasy. One by one, I staggered the kids through the two slides, but when it came to his turn, I made a point of not letting him down with any of the children at the same time. He opted to go for the red slide, the fast one. I was glad about that, as it meant he couldn't stop himself halfway down and tried to become some kind of 6-foot trapdoor spider for the next child coming through. I waved him through and he smiled at me. Oh God, I hate remembering that smile. His teeth were yellow, long and thin, the teeth of a long-time smoker and other more colourful drugs. I saw a flash of metal in those teeth too. Braces, I had thought, but before I could work out what the metal was for, he was down the slide. As soon as I saw him get out the bottom, I watched him climb out the pool and go for the exit. Thank fuck for that, I mused with a sigh, and let the next kid through. She must have been about 6, and she went straight for the red slide. I stopped her, as I did of anyone too young. Are you sure? It's a very fast slide. The question was only half felt, as I'd asked it about 100 times. She nodded excitedly, so I waved her through. I counted up to 7, as I always did, and just as I was about to wave the next kid through, I heard an almighty scream. I grabbed the boy that was about to throw himself down the slide and stared at the bottom, waiting for the girl to appear. It was only a few more seconds, but by God if it didn't feel like longer. Before she emerged, the water that pushed the children down the slide gushed a washed-out pink colour. The air caught in my throat as the girl followed. She fell out the end in a stream of hot red blood, the water dyeing pink around her. She screamed and flailed in the water, unable to keep the chlorinated liquid from her mouth and nose. Her mother was the first by her side, and she scooped her up. I saw what was making her scream bloody murder then. A huge gash from her right foot all the way to the middle of her side caused the flesh to flap around loose from her body. I can usually deal with blood. I'm a trained first aider, as all the lifeguards are, but this made me retch. As soon as she was seen, the place went into a frenzy. Lifeguards ushered everyone to leave as quickly as possible, and paramedics were called. It was only 20 minutes before the pool was empty of guests, and only the employees were left to survey the damage. You never would have known there'd been a girl bleeding out less than half an hour ago, by how clean the water looked now. Filters and chlorine had purified the water and left it spotless, but the sides where she had been laid were still drenched in watery blood and sticky footprints. By the time the cleaners showed up, the water had been turned off and we had filled out the accident report. I was told I could go home, but I desperately wanted to know what happened, so I stayed behind, helping out any way I could. I watched the cleaners get into climbing gear and hook onto the bars that lay behind and above the flumes. I climbed up the long set of stairs and back to my post, watching the man climb down the now dry slide as he was abseiling. There was silence as he climbed down, and everyone listened intently for what was down there. 2 minutes passed before he heard the cleaner's voice. "Holy shit. I found it, guys." A grunt echoed through the tube, and then the long wait for him to re-emerge back to the surface. When he finally came up, he held the culprit, a razor blade. It was completely clean of any blood, as the water had washed over it, but a chunk of flesh was still present. Apparently it had been jabbed into the middle of the slide, left pointing straight up, with a corner facing the direction of the oncoming children. I knew who had done it. I told everyone it was the tall man with the yellow smile. I told them he never had braces. I told them, but they said there was no proof. They said there was no evidence. I never knew you could have a fear of water slides. Well, I know now.